What's up, everybody? Jesse Miller here again, and you have been watching 10 things that you can do to immediately improve things in your worship set. And today we're on number 9, which is eliminating distractions. And, I realized that I threw in a few distractions for you guys recently. I don't know if you noticed, but I had the wrong slide on one of my videos a couple videos ago. I think it was number 7. Also, my wife let me know that one of the shirts that I wore was way too revealing for a church talk. And so anyway, I apologize in advance for that. But that's the thing. Sometimes we have distractions. We have things that distract people, and we don't even realize it. We don't even realize that we're distracting people. And so this one episode, I really feel like it's going to help you, because if you can eliminate distractions, then you can cause people to come into a place where they are focused on Jesus and rather than what's going on around them. And unfortunately, sometimes the greatest distractions are caused by one person, and that is the worship leader. And this is going to be a controversial talk, okay? Because some of you may agree, some of you may not agree. That's perfectly fine. Of course, we always base our things on wisdom from the Word of God. We always have a key verse. We always have something that we're basing it on. But when it comes right down to style or things like that, that's where personal interpretation can come into play. So, with that said, let's start with our verse. I always like to start with the verse. Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2 says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth." So I think if we can help people set their mind on things above rather than things on the earth, and we can eliminate as many distractions as possible, it's really going to help them hone in to worshiping God, creating a worship experience. If you want to learn how to perform, there's plenty of websites and videos and people to teach you how to perform. I'm not going to teach you how to perform. I think worship is an intimate thing that happens between a person and God, okay? And so I feel as a worship leader, our best thing that we can do, the best job we can do as a worship leader is to create an atmosphere where people are able to come unhindered into the presence, where they can come and pour out their heart to God, and God can talk to them, and they can have an experience with God. And I'm not saying an experience means to have fog machines and light shows and all that stuff, because frankly, a lot of times that can distract us from worshiping. But what I am saying is there's a lot of things we can do to help people, to facilitate them, to create an atmosphere. So that's what we're talking about today. So now, if you have your little sheet that you downloaded, notice on eliminate distractions, we've got some controversial key takeaways, okay? And I say they're controversial because they're up to your interpretation, okay? So anything that's up to interpretation, we're not talking about the pure, unadulterated Word of God, the uncompromised Word, okay? Because I'm a word man. We've been talking about that. But when we're talking about eliminating distractions, what might be a distraction for some might not be a distraction for others. But this is purely coming off of 25 years of standing and leading worship, sitting and leading worship, sitting and playing, leading worship with just my vocals. However, I've led worship. I've even done it with the guitar, unfortunately, a few times, because there's sometimes that it's unavoidable that, a guy who can do a few bar chords, and, sometimes you're in a situation where a keyboard is not practical, so I've had to adapt. But, my dainty little fingers, they are just, there's no calluses there, okay? No calluses. So I try to leave that up to the real guitar players, but I can, do all the chords, and I do have a capo to do the fake chords. So getting back to this, eliminating distractions This first one is probably the most controversial because my own wife doesn't necessarily agree with me on this one, okay? But what I'm going to say is you have a worship time, right? And then you have a sermon time. Or maybe you have a sermon and then a worship time. So my pet peeve is when we turn the worship into a sermon, all right? In my opinion, the time that's allotted for praise and for worship is a holy, sacred time to help people enter the presence of God. And I think if we can talk as little as possible, okay, talking is information. Singing is inclusive. So when I talk to you, like right now, I'm talking to you and you're listening to me, you're not talking along with me. You might be talking over me. You might not be paying attention to me, but you're not talking in sync with me. Unless I put some words up on the screen and then, had us all say them together. And I think that's pretty cool. Some churches have their congregation say things together. I think that's awesome. That's no problem with that. But when we turn into giving a 10-minute exhortation while everybody's standing, before we even start singing, or better yet, we've sang 2 songs and then we stop and give a 10-minute sermon, I think that there's going to be a disconnect, all right? Now, I personally don't do that. I have tried to cut as many words out of my worship sets as possible. In fact, if it was possible to not talk at all and just get up there and start singing, if that was a possibility, I would probably take advantage of that. Now, it's not always possible. Sometimes your pastor wants you to greet the congregation. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as your greeting is just, hey, let's get together, a call to worship, right? But I think the best call to worship, because of how many people are still milling about, is to start playing some music. And maybe you take a minute-long intro, and then you start singing. So when I start a worship set, I try to do as little talking as possible. I think it's a distraction. And then for sure, in the middle of the worship, unless I see an angel, no, I'm just kidding. Unless I really feel strongly in my heart that there's something that I need to say to the congregation, okay? And trust me, in 25 years, I've probably done this 5 times, okay, where I've actually exhorted the congregation, because I've never felt like taking 5 to 10 minutes to do a mini sermon while people are standing, while they're trying to worship, and then I cut in and I butt in and I start telling everything. I've always felt like, it's a distraction more than it is a blessing. Now, I've seen this done successfully, okay? Let's say you've done 2 or 3 songs and you really have something on your heart. You know what the best thing to do is? Hey, would everybody mind sitting down? I really feel like I want to share something from God and I just want to take a few minutes. Have them sit down. Because otherwise, they don't know what to do. They're in the middle. Maybe their hands are lifted. Maybe their eyes are closed. Whatever it might be. They're in the middle of worship. They're in the middle. And then all of a sudden, they're supposed to just stand there and watch you. You've got people in your congregation that are in their 70s and 80s. That might be hard on them to stand for that long. You also have people that are going to disconnect because they're trying to worship. They've entered into worship. And then now they've got to wake up and look at you and listen to you preach. So I'm not saying that it's wrong to ever say anything. I'm saying you've got to be careful about how you talk and interact and speak in the middle of a worship set, because the purpose of the worship time is for everybody to gather together and put their eyes on Jesus. It gets them in the attitude and the mood to hear the sermon. It puts them in the right frame of mind. It helps them forget about what's going on in their lives. It helps them focus on Jesus. So if you want them to do that, then stop preaching a sermon in the middle of your worship set and do worship. All right? I promise you make that change. If you're a talker, you make that little change, everybody's going to appreciate you for doing that, okay? Because you might have something good to say, but every week Every Sunday, every Wednesday night, you're gonna give an exhortation for 5 or 10 minutes. No, it's not gonna go over well, okay? Because people are gonna start tuning you out. They're gonna be like, oh, this is the part of the service where the worship leader has us standing for 10 minutes while he talks, and then we go back into another song. So you're creating a pattern that you probably don't want. You're creating a situation where you probably don't want these people to tune you out every week. And so you got to stop talking sometimes. Another thing, this next point, okay? This is so important. So important. And this is a plague of so many small and medium-sized churches. It's a plague. I mean, it is a virus. It is a killer of worship sets and sermons. You've got to get your sound system dialed in. I can't say it enough. If you don't dial in your sound system, then your sound system is going to work against you. Because there's nothing worse when you're just in that perfect moment and you feel God's presence moving, and then all of a sudden somebody's mic starts feeding back. All right. Oh, so awful. So all of a sudden, there's a bad cord. You got a bad cord that's cutting in and out. I led worship as a guest at somebody's church, and they said, "Oh yeah, we've got a keyboard, whatever," and get there, and the pedal isn't working. Like it's the opposite. So I unplugged it, plugged it. I tried everything. I tried to troubleshoot it, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna, because it's a cheap keyboard anyway. So I'm just gonna leave the sound on, so the polyphony can't be that high. If you know anything about polyphony, probably had 30 voices. So by the time I did a few things, those things that were being held down by the damper pedal were already gone, so it wasn't sounding muddy. It was fine. It was a cheap keyboard, so I was able to get through it. But their damper pedal didn't even work on the keyboard. That's a problem. You have, if your equipment is defective, you've got to fix it. Now, I understand budgets. Trust me. Like I said, I have started a church from scratch. Been a church planner. And I was the worship team, and I was the pastor, and I was the marketer, and I was the everything, the cleaner, the setup man. My wife did everything with the kids. So, I've been there for 5 years. We did that. 11 years before that, I was paid to be on staff at a church. So I totally understand. I did a lot of the finances at the churches I was at. So I've done it all. And so I know, how the money can come in one month and then not come in another month, especially in the town of farmers. You have a bad crop and the giving goes way down. There's all different things. They're all different. Trust me. And every economy. I know in Detroit, there was a pastor in Detroit that talked about when the crash of 2008 happened and people stopped buying cars for a while, then, 40% of his income for the church was just gone like that. And so I get it. Let's say you're in a recession. Let's say that you're in a depression. You've got to be creative with what you got. But if you have enough money to spend on, let's say, Facebook ads and this and that, and you're trying to, grow your church, but you don't have the right equipment, okay, then you're going to bring people there, and then they're going to hear that squeal, and trust me, that is a deal killer for some people. Kills your worship set. The pastor gets up, turns his mic on, and every week it's, can you turn me up a little bit? Can you turn me down? Can you try to stop that ringing? Trust me, it gets annoying for your congregation, especially when I've been to some places and I've run sound quite a bit, and there is a way to dial it in and pretty much eliminate almost all of that stuff, okay? And a lot of times, you've got two channels that are competing for each other, so the mics are cutting in and out because you just didn't turn the dial to a different channel. So you got two exactly the same mics from the same store that were tuned to the same frequency, and all you had to do is change the channel and it fixed the problem. Okay? That's an issue. These are simple things that have to be fixed. If you want to eliminate distractions, you are going to have to dial in your sound system. So that means educate yourself or pay somebody to come in that's a professional. And I really think, a lot of pastors don't want to lay down $1,000 to $1,500 for a professional to come in and set their sound and train their people for a weekend. But there are people who you could hire for 4 hours and maybe even less than $1,000 that are professionals that know what they're doing, and they can come in and they can set everything on your sound. You write down a list of things that's wrong, and a real professional who knows what the dBs mean, who knows what compression is, who knows what a limiter is, who knows what gates are, who knows how to go in and set the right EQ, who can shoot the room with a professional RTA mic, okay? And a lot of this also can be done with like a Drive Rack Pro or something like that. $400, $500, you slap that thing in there, it's got compression, it's got gates, it's got the equalizers, it even can dial in the brand of the speakers that you've got, and it'll tell you exactly where to put the mic in the room, and you set it there, you push the button, it does a little few beeps and this and that, like white noise, and they don't even need white noise with this thing anymore. It just goes beep, 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 okay, makes some funny sounds. And next thing you know, you've got the EQ set for your room. You could practically walk underneath the speakers with your mic just right there and no feedback. Okay, I've done it. Trust me, I've been in rooms that had bad acoustics, but we were able to fix them. Now, in a couple times, we did this with the Drive Rack, and we had the RTA mic, and sometimes we had to move it around to a couple different places to really find what is it picking up, what frequency is it picking up that we need to adjust so that when you step here, it won't feed back. And so what did I do? I took the mic, I walked all around the room, and we turned it up. We turned it up so that we knew the congregation could hear. I'm talking about a lapel mic. You can also do that with one of the over-the-ear mics. And walk around and check it out before Sunday. Don't wait till Sunday for all the problems to start, okay? Have this stuff dialed in. Really, within a week or two, you could get this all dialed in. But the problem is this, okay? You've got wonderful people who are volunteering their time, and you say, hey, can you run the sound? All you have to do is move the lever up and down. Okay, now, any professional out there knows there's a lot more to it than moving a lever up and down. Once it's dialed in, great. But if you don't have that soundboard set, man, a little change in EQ here or there can make the sound of the male voices better or much worse. Same with females. It can muddle their voices, or it can make them sound crisp and clear without being high-pitched. So somebody that's a professional knows how to set these things. But what do churches do? They just, especially small, medium-sized churches, they just keep plugging along and keep having problems every week. If it was me, if I was either a pastor or worship leader at, let's say, a church of 100, I would go to the board. I would talk to them. I would say, we need to find a professional to come in, and it's going to cost $1,000. Okay, let's say it's $1,000. And we need them to come in, and we need them to, when we're practicing, set everything. So we need to pay them for at least 3 hours on a night so we get it all dialed in. And then we need to pay them to come back on a Sunday morning and be there through our whole service and coach and teach and train, and we need to record it all. And so we're going to record it. We're going to take pictures of every setting that's on our board. We're going to take pictures of anything that was changed. And we're going to make sure that we know exactly where every knob was supposed to be. And if it's a digital mixer, we're going to take a picture of every channel. And we're going to have that, and we're going to keep it. Because we're not going to waste our $1,000, but we're going to spend it wisely so that we know that if anything should happen to that board, let's say the youth group comes in and they start messing with the board, we know we can get it back to ground zero, okay? We can get that board right back to where it should be. If it's a digital mixer, you can save a scene I mean, it's very simple. We can save that scene, and hopefully if it's a digital mixer, you can save the scene to the levels that you want each channel to be at. And if you have a powered slide knobs, those things just go whoop, and they go right up to where they need to be. Now, there's plenty of videos on how to run a soundboard. I mean, there's some great tutorials, and you could literally spend 10 to 20 hours just watching the videos and trying to dial everything in yourself. But there's something about a professional. So where do you find them? Well, they work sometimes at music stores. You can look for people that are roadies, some people that travel with the sound. There are sound professionals out there that will gladly, for let's say even $100 an hour, will take their time and come. And so, like I'm saying, it could cost $1,000, it could cost less. Maybe they're, depending on what they charge. So dialing in your sound is so vital to eliminating distractions. Because what will it do? When you got your sound dialed in, then on your practices are going to go better. Okay, everything's going to go better once you get your sound dialed in. And maybe you need to do two things. Maybe you need to hire a professional to come and tell you what equipment would be best for your room if you don't have the right equipment. Maybe you need somebody to come in and tell you whether a powered speaker is the best way to go, or whether putting an amp in another room would be the best way to go. There's so many ways you can do this, that you can fix your sound, okay? And so once you get your sound fixed, like they have a mapping system that can tell you exactly where to place your speakers. There's so many things you can do to fix this. And I see it especially on shoestring budgets. And remember, you're not paying your sound man, your sound woman, right? You're not laying anything out for them to be there and volunteer their time. But you're not giving them the right tools. Maybe they got a great heart and they want to help and they want to know, but they don't know what knobs to turn. They don't know what to do. They just know how to move the slider up and down. Now, like we're saying, you get it dialed in and you keep the bass on the bass channel, and that channel's dialed in with the right EQ on the channel. Okay, now you've put them in a position where all they have to do is move the slider up and down. That's great, man. So that's what it can do for you, to spend the money to dial it in. And if you don't get this part right, you're going to lose families. You're going to lose people. You're going to have people come and they're like, man, this isn't professional. I mean, maybe you can overcome it because of your love and your heart for the community and your heart for serving them. But if every week you're dealing with this screeching sound, you're dealing with a mic that cuts in and out because it just needs to be moved to a different channel because it's getting interference from something. Maybe it's too close to a cell phone channel. Maybe it's on a 1900 megahertz band and it's competing with 3 cell phones that are right beside it that are operating on a similar band. And you say, well, that can affect the digital channel. Well, yes, it can. It can. And if you want to know how, just take your phone, and a lot of phones still can affect speakers when they're too close to the speaker. So there's a lot of things that can harm your signals, that you've got to figure these things out. Make sure everything's on different channels. Make sure that your chords are good. Test the chord. If you're having a problem with a channel, test the chord. Maybe maybe that channel is bad on your snake. Who knows? But getting that diagnostic right is so vital, so important. Sound has always been an issue, especially in these smaller churches, because either you don't have the right equipment or nobody knows how to run it. Because I was at a church where we had this really great soundboard, professional, so many things it could do, but we were setting this up in a school. So you might set it up somewhere else and it might work fine, but you set it up in a school auditorium where all the sound is hitting off of everything. You're getting reverb, you're getting feedback. It has to be set and dialed in for that room. what really needed to happen at that church was we needed to get and shoot the room and make sure and get different places to find out and make sure that we had everything dialed in so that when we turned that system on, we had no issues. And it was a digital soundboard. It was perfectly capable of handling all this. But nobody knew how to run it. In fact, there was a guy that knew how to run it. He left the church, and then now nobody knows how to run this digital mixer. So what am I telling you? Dial your sound in, okay? I spent a lot of time on that on purpose because I want to help somebody out there. I want to help you in your church, all right? Next, if your sound person, musicians, or singers cause distractions, lead them to change or change who you lead, okay? If your guitarist is always over there tuning and doing all this stuff that's distracting, you got to say something to them. All right? If you have a raised platform and, you've got one of your guys that likes to wear short shorts. I'm just kidding. All right? But seriously, when it comes to modesty, you got to have some difficult talks occasionally. It's going to happen. We live in this new millennia of 2020, and it's going to happen. People they wear different things than they wore 40 years ago, and it hasn't gotten more conservative in the dress, if you know what I mean. So I'm not a big stickler for that, but you don't want to cause distractions, all right? You want people coming there to worship Jesus. You don't want them coming there because somebody's showing too much off from the stage, all right? So just be careful with that one. That's all I'm going to say. Now, the other way that we have distractions is there's not a good handoff between the pastor and the worship leader or between the MC. Nothing has been set up. Every week it's confusion. All right, well, when do I turn it over to him? I don't know, because we never talked about it. Who is supposed to come up when I'm done with this song? Or, do we have good hand signals to determine when that exchange is going to take place? Because a minute, let's say it takes a minute between when somebody says you may be seated, that's probably you, the worship leader, when the worship leader says you may be seated, and then there's a minute pause between when they're seated and when the person that's supposed to be there finally gets to their spot. Because really, the best handoff would be if the pastor is going to take over, that's great. And so then they take over, right? Whoever's coming up should be the one taking over. All right. The worst thing is when the worship leader does the sit down, and then really the person that says that should be the person that's the MC that comes up to explain, all right, thanks, man, God, we worship you, we love you. God, all right, praise you, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, everybody sit down or shake hands with your neighbor, however you do it at your church, okay? So coordinating a good handoff. And if your pastor hasn't delegated that, then have that conversation. If you're leading worship at a conference and the conference leader hasn't delegated that, then you need to have a conversation with that leader and say, who am I handing this off? Who's going to come up? Oh, well, probably this guy. Well, can we make sure we have that in place before we start? That way everybody knows what they're supposed to, and I can talk to them. I can let them know what my last song is going to be. See, if we're not having this conversation, then it's no wonder sometimes that we can't attract people to our churches when we don't have a good system in place, all right, for them. When we don't have something in place for them to know what to do next. We shouldn't be so sloppy with our churches when we could be the ones that are the professionals. Because I've been to big conferences, I've been to lots of sales trainings and meetings and things like this, and there's nothing worse than a poorly organized or poorly run conference in a non-Christian world. But when it comes to the Christian world, oh, well, that's how we do it at our church. Well, then let's change some things, right? Now, I'm not here to down or disparage any churches. That's not my goal. My goal is to give you things to think about of how you can increase, how you can grow, how you can gather more people to your church. Because if you have all these distractions, it's going to take away, and some people are not going to come. Some people are not going to come back to your church because of all the distractions. They're like, man, I was tossed around like a ping pong ball. And it's true. We ought to be helping these people, right? Now, make distraction and elimination a high priority and your team will follow. Okay, what do I mean by that? You ought to be the leader in this. You ought to, your station, wherever if you're playing guitar, if you're playing drums, if you're playing, I haven't seen too many worship leaders that lead from the drums, but I guess it is possible. If you're playing the keyboard, if you're playing the guitar, man, you are one radical dude. Now, whatever you're doing, your station ought to be clean and neat and nice, and it should be the example on the stage. Another distraction is when you look up on the stage and it just looks like, there's bags here and cases over there, and it's just like a whole mess on the stage. That's not professional. That doesn't tell people, oh, look how they have everything neatly and in order, decently and in order, like Paul said in 1 Corinthians 14:40. You're not doing things decently and in order when it's a mess up on your stage. So that's a distraction. Trust me. I went to a Burger King one time, and we walk in, and there's nobody there. And so that was a red flag right away, because it was like 7 p.m. on a Friday night. Next red flag, I look up, and the fluorescent lights are flickering. There's 5 lights. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where the light bulbs are literally flickering. It was like I had walked into a horror flick. And we get our drinks, and I go and I try to get some ice, and this one side doesn't work. The other side works, I guess. And then the first drink I tried is out, of course. What did you expect? And then I went in the bathroom when we were leaving, and the whole time, you know what I did at that restaurant? We didn't talk. I was on a date with my wife. We were about to go see a movie. We didn't talk about anything except how nasty the place was. How horrible. Like, I said, I will never come here again, ever. Like, because honestly, I didn't see the flickering lights until after we had paid. And I turn around, and I'm like, what? I thought maybe there was a strobe light on or something. It was horrible. My experience was terrible. And I still remember that restaurant. And as a small business owner, okay, because I do have an insurance business, but I also have a business of preaching, and also I'm a writer. I have a blog, so I have more streams of income than just my insurance business. Thankfully, my insurance business, I have the right person working for me, but we keep everything clean. We have very strong opinions about the first impression of what somebody sees. If the first thing somebody sees is trash and disorder, then that's what they're going to remember, and they may never come back to your church. So you've got to fix these things, all right? And I know I'm talking passionately about, how you look on your stage, but it's true. You'd be hard-pressed to find a mega church that has disarray on their platform. Okay? Everything is timed, everything is neat, everything is tidy. Okay? The reason some churches have grown so large is because their attention to detail and their ability to eliminate distractions. All right? And it's in sales, if you're in the sales world, the best salespeople are the ones who can take away every opposition to closing a deal. Okay? I did sell cars for a while. I was also a used car manager. And so my job as a car salesperson was to try to take away every objection that somebody had to buying a car. And then when I was a used car manager, I had to, when I was trying to buy a car, I had to look and see, is this car going to be profitable, or are there too many things that they're trying to hide that I can't see? And so when I would buy a car from, let's say, the auction or a private party, I was looking at records. I was looking on the Carfax to see if there was any accidents. I was looking underneath the car to see if there was frame damage. I was looking to see if it had been repainted. All you have to do is pop the hood, and it's real easy to see. All you have to do is look for, spray marks. I mean, it's very simple. And at first it was hard, but I became an expert at finding finding the right cars to buy that would make the most money for the dealership, because we didn't have to spend as much on fixing things. Okay? So, also, cleanliness. Cleanliness, the dealership was cleaned twice a day. Okay, people were there and they were sweeping and they were spot mopping if necessary, keeping the dealership looking good. Here at my office, my assistant, who's a licensed insurance agent, takes time to clean, and she does a fantastic job. And keeps everything, and bleaches, and everything. It's always clean. I never have to worry about our office being clean. And we've had a number of customers who are just, because when I bought the agency, the person before maybe wasn't the most clean, didn't have attention to detail. And, I had to change some things to keep business. I also had to change some things so we could grow new business. People want to do business with somebody that they like. Now, you're saying, well, how does that relate to church? Well, I'll tell you. We are God's hands and feet on the earth, right? We are his ambassadors. We ought to be professional ambassadors. And we ought to be people that somebody wants to follow. Look, if you don't have any sheep and you're in a position of authority, maybe there's something within you that you need to change so that people want to follow you. Look, I could go all through it about my battle with depression when I failed to plant a church because I wasn't spending enough time becoming the person that people needed to follow. You could say, well, it was because you didn't have any money. It was because you were working all these hours. Yes, that was some of it. But the other reason is because I wasn't secure enough in myself to trust God to bring that stuff into being. And I was always worried and always fearful. Are we going to pay the bills this month? Are we going to pay the bills for the church? Because the vast majority of the church was paid by my own salary. That's how we kept the lights on at the church. That's how we bought advertising for the church. That's how, and I can tell you this, our church was always clean. It was always inviting. It was always a place where I would want to go. It was just, there's a number of reasons why it failed, but ultimately, if you've got the part right with being right with God, then if you're still having problems, it's probably because there's some distractions that need to be eliminated. All right? And so if you're going to be successful as a worship leader, you're going to have to get rid of those distractions. Here's another takeaway. Purposely cause distractions in practice to see how your team will react. Try to make something happen. Okay? Try to make something happen. Try to do something and see how your team reacts. If they don't care, then you haven't done a good enough job of showing them how we need to eliminate some distractions. Find a way to rile them up a little bit, all right? Not mean, but you've got to try to distract them and then show them the importance of eliminating distractions. You're the leader. You're the pastor of that group. You need to pastor. You need to shepherd them, okay? Help them along. Now, go to your next page. Ways to immediately improve your sound. Since we took so much time talking about it, make sure your system is grounded properly. Okay? Very simple. If it's not grounded, look, I've had a lot of odd jobs. One of my odd jobs for 6 months, this was years ago, but for 6 months I installed cable TV, internet, telecom. Okay? That was my job, and I used my own vehicle to do it. And one of the things they taught us when I was learning in my 3 weeks of training was how important a ground was. Because if you've ever watched at somebody's house or maybe your house and you see these lines going up the TV, there's a simple reason. It's either their TV's not grounded properly, but in most cases, I was able to go out to the cable and notice that either the ground was not hooked to the right thing or the ground was not actually touching. There was no ground. And it was amazing how I was able to hook up a ground and go back inside, and all those lines going down their TV just disappeared, gone. That was simple as a ground. Now, the same thing. You've got a hiss. You've got some feedback from like a crunching, gurgling sound coming from your sound system. You probably are not grounded properly. You need to ground. You need to make sure that the electrical box that's going to your sound system, whatever's plugged into it, everything in that needs to be on some kind of line conditioner on top of being grounded properly. So these are some simple changes. Look, $100 for a line conditioner can solve a lot of problems. I run, even at this studio, I've got a line conditioner that I've got everything plugged into because I want to eliminate all of my grounding issues. I don't want any problems with grounding, and I want the line to be, to be free of spikes as well. You don't want spikes. You don't want if you have bad electric in your area, get rid of that. Ground properly. Hire an electrician. Trust me, it won't take an electrician long. They can go out and ground the box. They can make sure that everything is grounded, and it might take care of some of your hiss and some of your pop and clicks that you have coming through your main sound system. That's the first thing to check. The next thing, I already talked about it. Drive Rack 2, something that performs EQ, feedback elimination, and minor compression. I already talked about this next one. Check frequencies of all wireless products. Okay? Change to ensure none cut out. Replace any faulty products. Very simple. Next thing, hire a sound engineer for a day. Take pics. Okay? So this is just recapping what I already kind of went forward and talked about because it's so important. There's other ways. You might have some other ways that you could think of. Okay? Write them down. And then what are 3 changes I'm going to make to change in my sound system right away because I want to improve my sound right away. I don't want to have distractions at my church, okay? So, and here's what I put. When you eliminate distractions as much as possible, you allow the audience to focus on the reason they came, which is spending time with Jesus Christ. We must do everything in the natural to allow people to experience the supernatural. Man, you can take that to the bank. That is pure money right there. But it's true, okay? Our job as worship leaders is to help people go into God's presence. Everything we do should be focused on that. And if it's not, get your focus right. When you get your focus right, you're going to get your worship right. When you get your worship right, your pastor is going to love you. Your conference leader is going to love you. Your team's going to love you, okay? And not just love you, but they're going to work together in harmony and in unity for a common goal and a common purpose. Because you led them to that place by taking away the distractions, by eliminating objections. Any reason why somebody would say they wouldn't want to come back to your church. You're taking away all those reasons why they wouldn't want to come. Because your whole goal is to allow them to experience God. Amen? All right. We'll see you on the last one. And then I have one bonus video after that I want to just talk from my heart for a minute. But the next one is place high value on practice. And it's not just your Thursday night practice. So stay tuned and we'll see you in the next video.